Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to imagine being in an age where, honestly, your biggest worry should be high school homework. But instead, you're stepping out onto the biggest pitches in Europe, completely dominating for Barcelona and the Spanish national team. Well, that is the literal reality right now for Lamine Yamal. With his fearless dribbling and just incredible creativity, this school-aged kid has absolutely amazed fans all over the world. I mean, practically overnight, people have started calling him the future of football. But how exactly does that happen? How does a player go from, relative obscurity to a global household name in the blink of an eye? Today, we're going to explore the exact anatomy of a breakout star. To really understand Yamal's unbelievably fast rise, we have to look at the mechanisms of how a player becomes a global superstar literally overnight. Football is kind of unique in this way. In almost any other profession, climbing to the absolute top takes decades of slow, methodical progression. But on the pitch, all it takes is one incredible match, one unforgettable goal, one magical performance, and suddenly fans are chanting your name. The biggest clubs in the world are calling your agents, and you're just thrust right under this massive global spotlight. So, breaking down the source material, we can actually see three distinct pathways to this kind of sudden stardom: the emergency subs, the big stage wonders, and finally, the teenage prodigies.
Let's start things off with pathway number 1, stepping up from the bench, or the heroes who waited for their moment.
We've got two brilliant examples that perfectly illustrate the contrast here. Take Emiliano Martínez. He spent years, literally years, sitting on the bench, and frankly, very few people believed he'd ever become one of the world's best goalkeepers. But then, the Copa America happens, and later the FIFA World Cup. His crucial penalty saves helped Argentina lift major trophies, and overnight, he transformed into this absolute national guardian. Then, contrast that with Ole Gunnar Solskjær in the 1999 Champions League final. Manchester United were losing to Bayern Munich, right? They throw Solskjær on in pure desperation, and in injury time, he scores the winning goal. He completed one of football's greatest comebacks in just a few minutes, becoming a legend forever. And similarly, we have to talk about Divock Origi. Rewind to 2019. Liverpool faced Barcelona in what would become one of the greatest Champions League comebacks ever. They were completely without their two massive stars, Mohamed Salah and Roberto Firmino. They needed an absolute miracle. Enter Divock Origi. He scores twice in that game, including that incredibly famous goal from a quick corner. That single night transformed Origi into a Liverpool legend. It perfectly shows us that in this sport, legends are made by unforgettable moments, not necessarily long-term statistics. All right, moving on to pathway number 2, the big stage breakouts. This is all about seizing the world's attention. One tournament changed his entire career. That right there perfectly summarizes James Rodríguez. Before the 2014 World Cup, Rodríguez was mostly just known in Portugal. But then came Colombia's incredible World Cup run. If you remember that stunning volley he hit against Uruguay, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It became one of the greatest World Cup goals ever scored. He wins the Golden Boot, and suddenly Europe's absolute biggest clubs are fighting over him, leading to a massive, rapid transfer to Real Madrid. One tournament on the biggest stage on earth changed his entire life trajectory. The really crucial point here is the sheer speed of a breakout. Just think about the timeline for Marcus Rashford back in 2016. Manchester United is facing this massive injury crisis. So an unknown teenager named Marcus Rashford gets unexpectedly thrown into the starting lineup. Boom! He scores 2 goals on his Europa League debut. A few days later, he gets his Premier League debut. Boom! 2 more goals. Within a single week, this entirely unknown academy player became one of England's brightest young stars. The big stage does not care about your resume, it only cares about what you do when that whistle blows. Which brings us to our third pathway, and this directly mirrors Lamine Yamal's explosive trajectory right now, the teenage wonder kids. Just look at Kylian Mbappé. He was a known talent in France, sure, but it was the 2017 Champions League that properly introduced him to the entire world. He just absolutely destroyed elite teams like Manchester City and Borussia Dortmund with his breathtaking pace for Monaco. At just 18 years old, the world universally realized that football had found its next superstar. And that single dominant run soon led Paris Saint-Germain to sign him for one of the biggest transfer fees in human history. Right on his heels in this wonder kid category is Erling Haaland. Scouts knew he had talent, definitely, but it was his unstoppable Champions League explosion for Salzburg that made all of Europe sit up and pay attention. He was scoring goal after goal against absolute elite teams. He instantly became football's hottest young striker, making it basically inevitable that massive clubs like Dortmund and later City would come calling. It wasn't a gradual climb for him at all. It was a total explosion.
And completing this wonder kid trio before we get back to Yamal is Jude Bellingham. While still a teenager, Bellingham was delivering these strikingly mature performances in both the Champions League and international football. His composure, his leadership, and his sheer technical ability completely shocked fans. He wasn't just playing, he was dictating the game. Within months, he earned a dream move to Real Madrid. And that is exactly the kind of maturity we are seeing right now in Lamine Yamal. Now for the ultimate benchmark. The birth of a legend. As we watch Lamine Yamal tearing up the wings for Barcelona and Spain with such incredible flair, we absolutely have to compare his path to the ultimate Barcelona benchmark from our source material. To do that, we have to look back at a very specific year, 2007. This was the exact moment the greatest legend of the modern era was truly born. Because in 2007, Lionel Messi scored a goal against Getafe that looked so identical to Diego Maradona's famous solo goal that it sent shockwaves around the globe. The football world realized overnight they had a once-in-a-generation talent. From that single magic moment in 2007, Messi didn't just become a superstar, he became arguably the greatest footballer in history. That overnight breakthrough was the initial spark that eventually led to this unprecedented list of greatness: countless Ballon d'Or awards, multiple Champions League titles, and a World Cup triumph. When people look at Lamine Yamal playing for that exact same club, showing that same fearless ability at a schoolboy age, this is the massive legacy they're comparing him to. So, to wrap this all together, one match changes everything. Football history proves it time and time again. What makes an overnight legend? Whether you're an emergency substitute like Solskjær, a tournament wonder like James Rodríguez, or a school-aged kid like Lamine Yamal, the transformation is always defined by seizing that one impossible moment. It is all about taking the opportunity when the lights are at their absolute brightest and forcing the world to learn your name.
So, as you digest this explainer and think about the sheer speed at which football history is written, I want to leave you with this to ponder. With his generational talent, will Lamine Yamal actually reach those same historic heights as Lionel Messi? And out of all the overnight legends we've talked about today, whose explosive rise shocked you the most? Keep a close eye on the pitch, folks, because the next legend could literally be born tomorrow night.